The desert night at Giza has always carried a quiet accusation. Stone rising against stars, silence pressing heavier than the heat of day. If these monuments are tombs, why do they refuse to behave like graves? Why does their precision rival modern engineering? Why do their stones speak the language of astronomy, geology, and mathematics rather than death? Why does water seem to have touched places that history says were always dry? Why does the story feel complete only when questions are removed from it? And why does doubt return every time the evidence is examined too closely? Before we dive deeper, ignite that like button and prepare for the revelations to come. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from, what time it is there. And as always with our videos, the visuals are here to add context, but they aren't necessary to follow along. Thank you for always having our back. Prepare yourself, and let's dive in. The night air over the Giza Plateau carries a strange weight, as if the stones themselves are listening. Moonlight traces edges that should not be so sharp after thousands of years, revealing geometry that feels deliberate in a way nature rarely is. Standing at the base of the Great Pyramid, scale stops being an abstract concept and becomes physical pressure. The structure does not simply rise, it dominates perception, bending distance and proportion until the human body feels misplaced. This is not just size, it is intention rendered in stone. The Great Pyramid is composed of roughly 2,300,000 blocks. That number alone strains comprehension, but numbers become more unsettling when they gain substance. Each block weighs, on average, about 2.5 tons, roughly the mass of a modern family car. Many weigh far more. Deep inside, in the king's chamber, lie granite beams transported from Aswan, more than 800 kilometers to the south. Some of these blocks weigh between 50 and 80 tons. Imagine a single object heavier than a modern battle tank, quarried, shaped, transported across land and river, then lifted and placed with extraordinary precision. Now imagine this repeated again and again, without steel tools, without cranes, without wheeled vehicles designed for heavy cargo. The question is not whether it could be done. The question is how such consistency was achieved without error. Precision emerges everywhere once the eye adjusts. The base of the Great Pyramid covers more than 13 acres, yet it is almost perfectly level. The difference in height between its corners is measured in mere centimeters. Its orientation aligns to true north, south, east, and west, with an error of only a few arc minutes, a margin so small that even modern surveyors using satellite systems would need careful calibration to replicate it at this scale. The faces of the pyramid are not flat planes, but subtly concave, a feature invisible from the ground and revealed only under specific lighting conditions or aerial observation. This concavity appears intentional, as if the builders understood structural stresses in ways we struggle to articulate even today. Between the blocks, joints are so tight that a knife blade can barely slide into them. The mortar binding them is chemically complex, stronger in some cases than the limestone itself. This mortar is not simply mud or lime. It is a carefully engineered compound whose exact recipe remains debated. These are not the marks of trial and error frozen in stone. They suggest confidence, planning, and mastery applied on a monumental scale. Traditional Egyptology offers a coherent explanation. The Great Pyramid is said to be the tomb of Pharaoh Khufu of the 4th dynasty, built around 2560 BCE. Ancient writers like Herodotus, who visited Egypt 2,000 years after its construction, described massive labor forces working for decades. Modern archaeology has refined these accounts, replacing the image of enslaved masses with skilled, well-fed workers organized into rotating teams. Excavations near Giza have revealed bakeries capable of producing thousands of loaves a day, barracks arranged with military efficiency, and animal bones indicating diets rich in beef, goat, and sheep. These were not disposable laborers. They were participants in a national, even sacred project. The workers' tombs lie close to the pyramids themselves, an honor unimaginable for slaves. They were building something believed to be essential to cosmic order. In ancient Egyptian belief, death was not an ending, but a transformation. The pharaoh was not merely a king, he was a divine being whose survival after death ensured balance in the universe. The pyramid served as a vehicle for this transformation, a structure designed to guide the king's soul from earth to sky. This belief system was deeply astronomical. The soul of the pharaoh was destined to join the imperishable stars, the circumpolar stars that never set, and thus symbolized eternity. Narrow shafts extend from the king's and queen's chambers, once misidentified as ventilation ducts. These passages align with specific stars as they appeared in the sky more than 4,000 years ago. One points toward Orion, associated with Osiris, god of resurrection. Another aligns with Sirius, linked to Isis and rebirth. These are not decorative gestures. They are architectural expressions of theology, embedding the heavens directly into stone. Yet belief explains purpose, not process. Knowing why something was built does not automatically explain how it was achieved. The most widely accepted construction theories rely on ramps, but the details remain unresolved. A straight external ramp long enough to reach the pyramid's summit would have required more material than the pyramid itself. A spiral ramp wrapping around the structure would have obstructed precise measurements of corners and angles. Internal ramp theories, such as those proposed by some modern architects, offer elegant solutions but remain largely theoretical, supported by indirect evidence rather than direct proof. Egyptologists often point to architectural evolution as the key. Khufu did not appear in isolation. His predecessor, Sneferu, experimented extensively. The Medum pyramid seems to have collapsed. The bent pyramid at Dashur changes angle halfway up, possibly due to structural instability. The Red Pyramid, also at Dashur, represents the first successful smooth-sided pyramid. From this perspective, the Great Pyramid is the culmination of rapid innovation, the final expression of a century-long learning curve. The narrative is logical, even compelling. For a long time, however, it lacked something tangible, a document from the time of construction explicitly stating what was happening. That gap fueled speculation. Inside the Great Pyramid, there are no grand inscriptions proclaiming Khufu's achievement. Only rough quarry marks exist in hidden chambers above the king's chamber, naming work gangs with titles like Friends of Khufu. Skeptics argued these could have been added later, perhaps even forged during 19th century exploration. Then, in 2013, an unexpected discovery shifted the discussion. On the Red Sea coast, at a place called Wadi al-Jarf, archaeologists uncovered the oldest known harbor in the world. In nearby caves, they found papyrus documents remarkably preserved. Among them was the diary of an official named Merer. Written during the 26th or 27th year of Khufu's reign, it records the daily operations of transporting limestone blocks from the quarries at Tura to Giza by boat along the Nile. Merer explicitly names the Great Pyramid, calling it Akhet Khufu, the horizon of Khufu. This diary is mundane in tone, a logistical record rather than a myth or hymn, and that is precisely what gives it power. It provides direct, contemporary evidence that Khufu was actively involved in the pyramid project. For Orthodox Egyptology, it seemed to close the case. The pyramids were built by the Egyptians of the Fourth Dynasty, using methods we partially understand and others we have yet to fully reconstruct. And yet, doubt doesn't vanish so easily. Merer's diary proves that limestone casing stones were delivered during Khufu's reign. It proves that he claimed the monument as his own. It doesn't explicitly describe the earliest phases of construction. It doesn't explain the granite beams, the extreme precision, or the apparent technological leaps that appear suddenly and then fade from history. The diary answers one question while sharpening another. It confirms who finished the monument, but it leaves open the more unsettling possibility that finishing and originating may not be the same thing. The silence of the stones remains. The Great Pyramid stands, indifferent to scholarly debates, its geometry unchanged by consensus. It does not declare its secrets. It only invites scrutiny, and the closer one looks, the more the edges of the accepted story seem to blur. The structure feels less like a conclusion and more like an opening, a threshold between what is known and what refuses to be comfortably explained. As attention shifts away from the towering geometry of the pyramids, another presence begins to assert itself on the Giza Plateau, older in spirit, if not in official chronology. The Great Sphinx does not rise from stacked blocks. It emerges from the bedrock itself, carved directly from the limestone ridge, as if released rather than constructed. Its body stretches more than 70 meters, a lion recumbent in eternal vigilance, while its head, crowned with the royal Nemes headdress, stares unblinking toward the eastern horizon. Every morning, the sun rises exactly where its gaze falls, a daily ritual repeated tens of thousands of times. Orthodox history identifies the Sphinx as the likeness of Pharaoh Khafre, builder of the Second Pyramid, carved around 2500 BCE to guard his funerary complex. This interpretation appears neat and orderly. The Sphinx aligns with Khafre's causeway, and nearby temples incorporate similar stone blocks. Yet the monument itself refuses to fit comfortably into this tidy narrative. Its proportions are strange. The head appears too small for the massive leonine body, as if resized after the fact. More unsettling still is the condition of its surface. The Sphinx is deeply eroded, but not in the way desert monuments usually are. Wind-driven sand scours stone horizontally, carving sharp edges and undercutting surfaces over long periods. The Sphinx displays something else entirely. Along its body and, more importantly, along the walls of the enclosure that surrounds it, the limestone is worn into deep vertical grooves. The stone looks softened, rounded, like wax that has slowly melted and rehardened. These undulating channels run from top to bottom, following the path of flowing water rather than airborne sand. To an untrained eye, this may appear as simple age. To a geologist, it is a signature. Such erosion patterns are characteristic of prolonged rainfall, heavy precipitation, that repeatedly pours over exposed rock. This is not the effect of a rare storm or a brief flood. It suggests sustained wet conditions over long spans of time. Here, the problem becomes unavoidable. According to established climate history, the Giza Plateau has been arid desert since long before 2500 BCE. Rainfall sufficient to carve such features should not have existed during Khafra's reign. This observation was first raised seriously in the mid-20th century by a scholar named Orion, a Schwaller de Lubitsch, a philosopher and independent Egyptologist who noticed the anomaly but lacked geological authority. Decades later, writer John Anthony West revisited the idea and brought in a professional geologist, Dr. Robert Schoch of Boston University. Schoch approached the Sphinx not as a cultural artifact, but as exposed rock, a surface that records environmental history in its scars. Schoch examined the enclosure walls and the Sphinx's body, comparing them with nearby tombs and structures that are unquestionably Old Kingdom in origin. Those structures show the expected horizontal wind erosion. The Sphinx does not. Furthermore, the deepest erosion appears on the upper portions of the body and enclosure, not at the base. If groundwater or Nile flooding were responsible, the lower sections would be more affected. Instead, the damage decreases towards the ground, precisely the opposite of what rising water would produce. From a geological perspective, Schoch concluded that the Sphinx must predate the desertification of the region. The Sahara was not always a sea of sand. During a period known as the African Humid Period, much of North Africa was a green savanna with lakes, rivers, and monsoon rains. This wet phase ended between roughly 5000 and 4000 BCE. For the Sphinx to exhibit the level of erosion visible today, it would have had to exist not only during that wet era, but for centuries, possibly millennia, before it ended. The implications are staggering. Even Schoch's most conservative estimate places the carving of the Sphinx around 7000 to 5000 BCE, thousands of years earlier than the Fourth Dynasty. That would make it older than the Egyptian state itself, older than hieroglyphic writing, older than the Bronze Age. It would place the Sphinx in a time when conventional history tells us humans lived as scattered hunter-gatherers, lacking cities, monumental architecture, or advanced engineering. If this is true, the Sphinx becomes a survivor from a forgotten chapter of human history. Its body, weathered by rains that no longer fall, would be a fossilized memory of a different world. Under this lens, Khafra's role changes. He did not create the Sphinx. He inherited it. He may have cleared it of sand, repaired its damaged head, and integrated it into his own complex, reshaping its face into his royal likeness as an act of appropriation rather than creation. This idea offers a compelling explanation for the Sphinx's proportions. If the original monument was a full lion, carved when the climate was wet, and the constellation Leo held special significance, its head would have been far more eroded by rainfall. Recarving that damaged head into a human face would require reducing its size to reach intact stone. The result would be exactly what we see today, a head that appears undersized and far better preserved than the body below it. Egyptian texts are strangely silent about the construction of the Sphinx. There are no detailed inscriptions describing its carving, no celebratory reliefs depicting its creation. For a civilization meticulous in recording royal achievements, this absence is notable. It makes sense if the Sphinx was already ancient, a sacred relic from the mythical first time, Zep Tepi, when the gods were said to have ruled the land before human kings. The debate between geologists and Egyptologists remains unresolved, not because evidence is lacking, but because the implications are uncomfortable. Accepting an older Sphinx forces a reconsideration of the entire Giza complex. If one structure on the plateau is far older than believed, others may be as well. The pyramids and temples could represent layers of construction, restoration, and reinterpretation, rather than a single burst of innovation in the Old Kingdom. Standing before the Sphinx, this tension becomes palpable. It does not feel like a monument created in a hurry of dynastic ambition. It feels patient, as if it has already watched civilizations rise and fall. Its gaze towards the sunrise suggests continuity rather than ownership, a marker placed to endure changes that its makers knew were coming. The Sphinx thus shifts the focus of the mystery. No longer is the question limited to engineering methods or labor organization. It becomes temporal. How old is this place, really? And if part of Giza belongs to a time far earlier than Egypt's recorded history, what kind of people lived there? What knowledge did they possess? And why did their story vanish so completely that only stone remembers them? The wind moves softly across the plateau, filling the Sphinx's enclosure with whispering sand. The grooves in the limestone remain, indifferent to academic arguments. They record a climate that no longer exists and hint at builders who worked under skies heavy with rain. The Sphinx does not explain itself. It simply endures, an eroded witness standing at the boundary between accepted history and a much deeper, more unsettling past. If the Sphinx anchors Giza to a time when rain still shaped the land, the sky above the plateau pulls the narrative even further back. Ancient Egypt did not separate earth from heaven. The landscape was a mirror, and architecture was a way of fixing cosmic order into stone. To understand Giza, one must stop looking only at walls and blocks and begin looking upward, to the slow choreography of stars that governed ancient thought. The pyramids are aligned to the cardinal directions with extraordinary precision, but cardinality alone was never the end goal. For the Egyptians, the north was not simply a compass point. It was the domain of the imperishable stars, those that never dipped below the horizon. These circumpolar stars symbolized eternity, constancy, and divine immortality. To face north was to face forever. The Great Pyramid's passages and chambers were arranged with this celestial destination in mind, turning stone corridors into symbolic pathways for the soul. The narrow shafts extending from the king's and queen's chambers are the clearest expressions of this cosmology. For decades they were dismissed as ventilation channels, a label that never truly made sense. A sealed monument intended to house a dead king for eternity would not require airflow. When astronomers and Egyptologists eventually calculated their orientations, the picture sharpened. These shafts point toward specific stars as they appeared around 2500 BCE. Orion's belt, associated with Osiris, god of resurrection and ruler of the afterlife, becomes a destination. Sirius, whose heliacal rising signaled the Nile's flood and rebirth of the land, becomes another. The pyramid is not only aligned to the earth, it is tuned to the sky. This alone is remarkable, but it is only the beginning. In the late 20th century, an engineer named Robert Bovell stepped back from individual alignments and examined the plateau as a whole. From above, the arrangement of the three main pyramids reveals an oddity. The pyramids of Khufu and Khafra form a clear diagonal line, but the third pyramid, Menkaur's, is offset slightly to the east. Given Egyptian obsession with symmetry and order, this deviation is unlikely to be accidental. Bauval noticed something familiar in this asymmetry. The three stars of Orion's belt, Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka, form a similar pattern. Two lie nearly in a straight line, while the third is slightly displaced. The resemblance is striking. When scaled appropriately, the relative sizes of the pyramids also correspond to the relative brightness of the stars, with the two largest pyramids matching the brighter stars and the smaller pyramid matching the dimmer one. In Egyptian mythology, Orion was not a Greek hunter, but Osiris himself, the god who died and was resurrected, ruling the Duat, the realm of the dead. Building resurrection monuments in the image of Osiris's celestial form fits seamlessly within Egyptian theology. The pyramids become not just tombs, but terrestrial reflections of the heavens, grounding divine order in limestone and granite. At first glance, this Orion correlation seems to reinforce the orthodox timeline. The star alignments of the shafts match the sky of the Fourth Dynasty, suggesting intentional design for that era. Yet when Bauval tested the full configuration using astronomical simulations, a subtle discrepancy emerged. Due to a phenomenon known as the precession of the equinoxes, the Earth's axis slowly wobbles, completing a full cycle roughly every 26,000 years. Over millennia, this wobble shifts the apparent positions of stars relative to the horizon. When Bauval rewound the sky to 2500 BCE, the alignment between Orion's belt and the pyramid layout was close, but not perfect. The orientation was slightly rotated. For a culture obsessed with precision, almost feels unsatisfactory. The principle often summarized as above, so below, implies correspondence, not approximation. Bauval continued rewinding the celestial clock, moving backward through centuries, then millennia, watching Orion slowly rotate in the sky. He stopped at around 10,500 BCE. At this moment, the alignment snapped into place. Orion's belt, at its lowest point in the precessional cycle, matched the orientation of the three pyramids with remarkable accuracy. The deviation vanished. Earth and sky locked together as if frozen in that specific moment in time. This date is not arbitrary. It coincides uncannily with the era suggested by geological analysis of the Sphinx. Around 10,500 BCE, the last ice age was ending. Massive climate shifts were underway. Sea levels were rising rapidly as ice sheets melted. Flood myths from cultures across the world cluster around this same period, preserving memories of catastrophic change. The correlations deepen further. At the spring equinox in 10,500 BCE, the constellation Leo rose directly on the eastern horizon. If the Sphinx was originally a lion, as its body suggests, then its gaze towards the east would have aligned perfectly with its celestial counterpart. The lion on Earth would have watched the lion in the sky rise at dawn on the most symbolically charged day of the year. This is not decorative symbolism. It is astronomical storytelling on a planetary scale. The Nile adds another layer. To the Egyptians, the Milky Way was a celestial river, the heavenly reflection of the Nile itself. In the sky of 10,500 BCE, the Milky Way lay adjacent to Orion, just as the Nile flows beside the pyramids on the ground. Earth becomes a map of the heavens, scaled down but faithful in form. The plateau transforms into a snapshot of the cosmos at a precise moment in deep time. If this interpretation holds, Giza is not merely a product of the Old Kingdom. It is a monument encoding a date, a message carved into stone that says, in effect, "Remember this time." Such a message makes little sense if the builders were celebrating a contemporary achievement. It makes profound sense if they were commemorating a moment of crisis or transformation. According to conventional history, humanity at 10,500 BCE consisted of small bands of hunter-gatherers. Agriculture had not yet taken hold. Writing was thousands of years away. Cities did not exist. And yet the Giza complex, under this interpretation, reflects advanced astronomical knowledge, large-scale planning, and precise engineering. The discrepancy is enormous. One way to resolve it is to reject the correlations as coincidence. Another is to accept that our picture of prehistory may be incomplete. The Orion correlation hypothesis does not demand that Egyptians of the 4th dynasty possessed impossible knowledge. Instead, it suggests they inherited something older, a sacred landscape already charged with meaning, already aligned to the sky in ways they preserved, modified, and reinterpreted. In this light, the 4th dynasty becomes a civilization of restorers rather than originators. They understood enough of the inherited symbolism to maintain it, adding their own star alignments, inscriptions, and casing stones. They overlaid their theology onto a foundation whose deepest logic came from a forgotten age. Giza then becomes a palimpsest, a surface written over multiple times, each layer leaving traces of its worldview. The stars provide the key because they change predictably and leave no room for human revision. Stone can be moved. Text can be rewritten. The sky cannot be persuaded to lie. When night falls over the plateau and Orion rises once more, the alignment is no longer perfect. The Earth has shifted. Precession has carried us into a different age. But the memory remains locked in stone. The pyramids and the Sphinx stand as markers of a sky long gone, pointing not just to gods and kings, but to a time when humanity may have known more than it was supposed to remember. When the gaze lowers from stars back to stone, the mystery does not shrink. It sharpens. The pyramids and temples of Giza are not only impressive for their scale or symbolism, but for the quality of their workmanship. This quality becomes most unsettling not in limestone, which is relatively soft and forgiving, but in the hardest materials the builders chose to work with deliberately. Granite, basalt, and diorite appear again and again at the most critical points of construction, as if hardness itself was part of the design. Granite is not merely stone. It is a crystalline composite dominated by quartz and feldspar, materials that rank high on the Mohs hardness scale, a simple way of comparing resistance to scratching. Quartz sits at around 6 to 7 on this scale. Copper, the hardest metal available to the Egyptians of the 4th dynasty, ranks at about 3. This mismatch matters. In practical terms, a softer material cannot cut a harder one without assistance. It can scrape, abrade, or slowly wear it down if paired with something harder, but it cannot slice cleanly or precisely on its own. Orthodox explanations acknowledge this limitation and attempt to work around it. The prevailing model suggests that copper tools were used not as cutting edges, but as carriers for abrasives. Sand, rich in quartz particles, would be poured beneath copper saws or drills. As the tool moved back and forth or rotated, the quartz grains would grind away the stone. Over time, given enough patience and labor, even granite could be shaped. In theory, this is sound. Abrasive cutting is a real and effective technique. The problem arises when theory meets evidence. The surfaces left behind in many granite artifacts are not rough, uneven, or randomly scarred, as one would expect from slow abrasive grinding. They are smooth, flat, and in some cases astonishingly precise. The most striking examples lie hidden from casual tourists, deep within structures or buried underground. Consider the granite sarcophagus in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. It is a single block of rose granite, hollowed with sharp internal corners and flat interior faces. Measurements taken with precision instruments show that these surfaces are remarkably planar, deviating by fractions of a millimeter. Achieving such flatness today requires rigid machine tools, stable reference surfaces, and controlled environments. Producing it by hand, inside a confined space, using copper tools and sand, stretches credibility. The corners deepen the problem. Creating an external 90-degree angle is relatively easy. Material can be removed freely. Creating a sharp internal corner is much harder. Impact tools tend to round such corners. Abrasive saws must overcut to reach them, leaving telltale marks. Yet the corners inside the sarcophagus are crisp and clean, with no evidence of overcutting. The stone appears to have been shaped with a method capable of reaching directly into the corner without collateral damage. If this were an isolated anomaly, it could be dismissed as exceptional craftsmanship. But it is not isolated. Beneath the sands of Saqqara lies the Serapeum, a subterranean complex consisting of long tunnels carved into limestone bedrock. Along these tunnels sit enormous granite boxes, each carved from a single block, each weighing between 70 and 100 tons, including its lid. These boxes were intended to house the sacred Apis bulls, but their level of precision far exceeds any ritual requirement. The inner and outer surfaces of these boxes are astonishingly flat. When measured with straight edges and optical methods, they show tolerances comparable to modern surface plates used in engineering laboratories. The lids fit so closely that they adhere under their own weight, creating suction. This is not decorative polish. It is functional precision. The standard explanation again invokes time, labor, and abrasives. Stones were rubbed together, sand added, surfaces checked repeatedly. Yet this explanation introduces a paradox familiar to engineers. To create a surface that flat, the tool used to check or grind it must itself be at least as flat. This leads to an infinite regress. Without an initial reference surface of extreme flatness, achieving such results consistently becomes nearly impossible. Drilling presents an even sharper challenge. Throughout Egypt, cylindrical drill cores have been found, extracted from granite and other hard stones. These cores preserve the marks left by the drilling process, spiral grooves that record how fast the drill advanced with each rotation. This spiral pattern is not decorative. It is mechanical handwriting. When these grooves are measured, the results are startling. In some cases, the drill advanced several millimeters per revolution. For comparison, even modern diamond-tipped drills cutting granite advance far more slowly under controlled conditions. Achieving such feed rates would require immense downward pressure combined with high rotational speed. A thin copper tube spun by hand cannot provide either. Under such stress, copper would deform, buckle, or tear long before penetrating hard quartz crystals at that rate. These observations were first noted by early Egyptologists like Flinders Petrie, who openly admitted that some of the stonework exceeded his understanding of ancient technology. Later engineers, approaching the evidence without allegiance to historical narratives, reached similar conclusions. The marks left behind resemble those produced by machine tools, not by manual abrasion. Saw marks tell the same story. In several locations, including Giza and Aswan, stone blocks show long, straight cuts through granite and basalt. These cuts are uniform in width and depth, with smooth surfaces that sometimes appear vitrified, as if heat played a role. Manual sawing with copper and sand tends to wander, producing uneven kerfs and rough textures. These cuts do not wander. They behave as if guided by rigid systems. Even more curious are surfaces that seem neither cut nor hammered. In certain quarries and temple blocks, the stone appears scooped or softened, as if removed with a blunt, rounded tool. The texture resembles material that has been partially melted or plastically deformed, then allowed to harden again. No known hand tool from dynastic Egypt produces such marks. When all these details are viewed together, a pattern emerges. There appear to be two technological signatures present in ancient Egypt. One is familiar and well documented: mud brick architecture, limestone carving, copper tools, incremental construction. The other is rare, concentrated, and anomalous. Extreme precision in hard stone, massive monolithic components, and machining marks that imply forces and controls far beyond simple hand tools. This second signature appears suddenly in the archaeological record, reaches its peak around the time of the Great Pyramid, and then fades. Later, Egyptian monuments, though beautiful, rarely match the precision seen at Giza or the Serapeum. It is as if a capability was briefly accessed and then lost. One explanation is that the Egyptians of the 4th dynasty possessed methods we have not yet rediscovered. Another is more unsettling: that they inherited or repurposed structures and techniques originating from a much earlier culture. In this scenario, the copper tools found in tombs and workshops belong to the restorers, not the original builders. They explain the finishing work, not the deepest cuts. Stone does not lie. It records the forces applied to it with ruthless honesty. The question is whether modern interpretation is willing to listen to what those records suggest. If the workmanship at Giza reflects technology inconsistent with its supposed age, then the timeline itself may be the wrong tool. And if the timeline is wrong, the story of who built these monuments and why becomes far more complex than a single dynasty carving its legacy into the desert. When precision stonework and anomalous tooling marks are taken seriously, the purpose of the Great Pyramid begins to shift. A structure does not need to be a tomb to contain a stone box, and it does not need inscriptions to justify its existence. Function leaves different traces than ritual. In this light, the Great Pyramid starts to resemble not a memorial to death, but an apparatus whose role has been misunderstood because its context was lost. No human remains have ever been found inside the Great Pyramid. This absence is often dismissed as the result of ancient looting, but looting alone does not erase everything. In later royal tombs, even heavily plundered ones, traces remain. Fragments of coffins, funerary figurines, wall texts, ritual debris. In the Great Pyramid, the chambers are bare. The walls are undecorated. The granite box in the king's chamber is uninscribed, lidless, and damaged. It does not resemble the elaborately decorated sarcophagi found elsewhere in Egypt. It resembles a container whose significance lay in its physical properties rather than its symbolism. Engineering analysis invites a different interpretation. The Great Pyramid sits atop a limestone plateau riddled with natural fissures and water channels. Beneath it lies an aquifer connected to the Nile system. The pyramid's lowest chamber, cut deep into the bedrock, is unfinished in appearance, with rough walls and an irregular floor. To an archaeologist, this suggests abandonment. To an engineer, irregularity can signal function. Rough surfaces promote turbulence. Turbulence creates vibration. One theory proposes that water flowing through the bedrock beneath the pyramid was deliberately channeled into this subterranean chamber. As water pressure fluctuated, it would produce rhythmic pulses, a phenomenon similar to hydraulic ram effects observed at modern fluid systems. These pulses would generate low-frequency vibrations traveling upward through the structure. The pyramid would not be a passive mass of stone, but a resonator coupled to the earth itself. Material choice becomes crucial here. The bulk of the pyramid is limestone, a relatively good insulator. The internal passages and chambers, however, especially the king's chamber and its relieving chambers above, are constructed entirely of granite. Granite is rich in quartz, and quartz exhibits piezoelectric properties, meaning it can generate electrical charge when subjected to mechanical stress or vibration. This is not speculative physics. It is a principle exploited in modern sensors, oscillators, and timekeeping devices. If low-frequency vibrations from below traveled upward and stressed the granite components, those components could generate electrical potentials. On a small scale, this effect is subtle. On the scale of millions of tons of stone, precisely shaped and locked into place, the cumulative effect could be substantial. The pyramid's geometry, narrowing toward the top, would further focus energy inward and upward, much like a waveguide. The so-called Queen's Chamber adds another layer. Its walls contain traces of salt, suggesting chemical activity. Two narrow shafts extend from this chamber, distinct from those in the King's Chamber. Their function has long puzzled researchers. One hypothesis suggests these shafts acted as conduits for chemicals introduced into the chamber. Ancient Egyptians were skilled chemists by any reasonable standard, producing acids, salts, pigments, and reactive compounds through controlled processes. A speculative but internally consistent model suggests that zinc compounds and acidic solutions were introduced into the Queen's Chamber, producing hydrogen gas through chemical reaction. Hydrogen is exceptionally light and highly resonant. If released into the Grand Gallery and King's Chamber, it would alter the acoustic and electromagnetic properties of those spaces. The pyramid would transition from a static resonator to a dynamically tuned system. The Grand Gallery itself supports this reading. It is not a ceremonial hallway. Its steeply sloped walls, corbelled construction, and precise dimensions suggest mechanical purpose. It could function as a pressure release corridor, an acoustic amplifier, or a resonance chamber. Its design is excessive if the goal was simple access. It makes more sense if it was part of an energy management system. At the heart of this system lies the King's Chamber. Its dimensions create harmonic relationships that have been confirmed through acoustic testing. Sounds generated within it are amplified and sustained. The chamber behaves like a finely tuned resonant box. The granite walls, ceiling beams, and floor form a closed circuit for vibration. The relieving chambers above, often described as weight distribution features, may also serve to modulate resonance, acting as acoustic buffers or frequency filters. The granite box in the center of the chamber becomes the final component. Its placement is exact. Its dimensions are precise. If vibrations within the chamber reached a threshold, the box itself would resonate. Under such conditions, the entire pyramid could behave like a massive oscillating system, converting mechanical energy from the Earth into electrical or electromagnetic output. Originally, the pyramid was encased in highly polished white limestone from Tura. This casing would have acted as an insulating layer, preventing energy leakage through the sides. The apex, now missing, likely held a capstone made of conductive material, possibly gold or an alloy. This capstone would serve as a terminal, allowing energy to discharge upward into the atmosphere. In this interpretation, the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, but a power plant. Not in the modern sense of turbines and generators, but as a system that harvested natural earth energy and transformed it into usable output. Such energy could be transmitted wirelessly, ionizing the air above the apex and creating a focused column of electromagnetic emission. This idea is radical only if judged by modern assumptions. Ancient cultures did not separate science from spirituality. Energy, light, sound, and consciousness were aspects of the same cosmic order. A structure designed to interact with the earth and sky would naturally occupy both practical and symbolic roles. Power generation and spiritual transformation would not be mutually exclusive. The disappearance of this technology becomes less mysterious if its context is considered. If the Great Pyramid was part of a larger system created by an earlier civilization, its maintenance would require specialized knowledge. After a global cataclysm, such knowledge could easily be lost. Later cultures might preserve fragments of understanding through myth and ritual, using the structure without fully comprehending its original function. This framework also explains the concentration of anomalous stonework at specific sites. High-precision granite work appears where it is structurally or functionally necessary, not everywhere. Later Egyptian construction, impressive in its own right, rarely matches this level of machining. The technology did not gradually evolve. It appears, peaks, and vanishes. Whether the pyramid truly functioned as an energy device remains unproven. But when its architecture, materials, acoustics, and geological context are viewed together, the tomb explanation begins to feel insufficient. The Great Pyramid does not behave like a grave. It behaves like a machine, silent now, stripped of its casing and capstone, but still standing as a fossilized system whose original purpose lies just beyond the reach of accepted history. If the Great Pyramid functioned as more than architecture, its true role cannot be separated from the human presence it was designed to contain. Stone, vibration, geometry, and energy are only half of the equation. The other half is consciousness. Ancient Egyptian culture did not view awareness as a byproduct of the brain. It saw consciousness as a fundamental force, something that could be shaped, guided, and transformed under the right conditions. Within this worldview, the pyramid ceases to be inert. It becomes an interface. The king's chamber is unlike any burial space known from later Egypt. Its walls are bare, its proportions exact, its material choice deliberate. Granite dominates every surface, enclosing the space in a crystalline shell. Granite does not absorb vibration easily. It reflects and sustains it. In acoustical terms, the chamber behaves like a resonator, amplifying certain frequencies while dampening others. Modern experiments have shown that specific tones produced within the chamber linger unnaturally long, filling the space with standing waves that seem to press against the body. Imagine entering this chamber not as a tourist, but as an initiate. The journey itself is part of the process. The passages leading upward are narrow, forcing the body to bend, to submit. The air grows still, light fades, sound disappears. By the time the chamber is reached, sensory input has already been reduced to a minimum. When the entrance is sealed and darkness becomes absolute, the brain is cut off from its usual anchors. Neurology offers insight into what follows. In sensory deprivation, the brain does not become quiet. It becomes creative. Deprived of external stimuli, neural networks begin generating internal imagery, sounds, and sensations. Time loses coherence. The boundary between thought and perception dissolves. In modern settings, such conditions can induce powerful altered states within hours. Now add the environment of the pyramid. Low-frequency vibrations transmitted through the stone would be felt rather than heard, resonating through the body's tissues. Quartz-rich granite under stress generates subtle electromagnetic fields. The human nervous system is exquisitely sensitive to such fields, particularly structures deep within the brain associated with regulation of sleep, vision, and perception. The pineal gland, long mythologized as the seat of inner sight, responds to electromagnetic and photic stimuli in ways science is only beginning to quantify. In this context, the granite box in the center of the chamber takes on a different meaning. Its dimensions closely match those of the human body. It is not sized to contain a wrapped mummy with grave goods. It is sized to hold a living person lying still. The box isolates the body from the floor, suspending it within a resonant field. Any vibration in the chamber would concentrate within the stone container, coupling directly to the person inside. Ancient Egyptian texts describe a journey through the duat, the underworld, as a perilous passage through darkness, chaos, and transformation. These texts are often read as funerary guides for the dead, but their language is experiential, not symbolic. They describe gates, guardians, tests of identity, and moments of disintegration followed by rebirth. Such descriptions closely parallel accounts of profound altered states reported across cultures and eras. The Book of the Dead, more accurately translated as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, reads less like a memorial and more like a manual. It provides names to speak, truths to affirm, and instructions to follow during a passage that must be navigated consciously. This makes sense if the experience it describes was intended to be undergone while alive. Knowledge would not be read after death. It would be memorized beforehand. Within this framework, the pyramid becomes a tool for initiation. The candidate enters as a mortal and emerges transformed, having faced the dissolution of identity without physical death. Such experiences permanently alter perception. Fear of death diminishes. Authority becomes internalized. In a society where the pharaoh was both king and god, such a transformation would legitimize absolute power. This interpretation explains several anomalies. It explains why the Great Pyramid lacks inscriptions. Writing on resonant surfaces would disrupt acoustics. It explains why no royal remains were found inside. No one was meant to die there. It explains why later Egyptian kings did not replicate the structure. Once the original knowledge faded, the pyramid became unusable, revered but misunderstood. The initiation hypothesis also aligns with the broader pattern of Egyptian sacred architecture. Temples were not places of congregation, but controlled environments designed to manipulate light, sound, and movement. Columns narrowed perspective. Ceilings lowered gradually. Reliefs were placed where torchlight would animate them. Ritual was experiential, not abstract. If the Great Pyramid was the apex of this tradition, it would represent the most advanced manipulation of human perception ever attempted in stone. Not a symbol of death, but a crucible for consciousness. Such a device would not need constant use. Even a handful of successful initiations would be enough to anchor an entire civilization's belief system. The loss of this technology would be catastrophic, not because of missing machines, but because of missing understanding. Without the ability to reproduce the experience, later generations would preserve its memory through myth. The pharaoh would still be said to ascend to the stars. The pyramid would still be called a tomb. Language would survive where function did not. Seen this way, the Great Pyramid stands at the intersection of science and spirituality, not as a primitive attempt at either, but as a sophisticated synthesis. Its builders understood that consciousness could be engineered through environment. Stone was not passive. It was an active participant in transformation. When the pyramid fell silent, stripped of its casing, its capstone gone, its internal systems disrupted, it became a shell. But shells retain shape long after life has left them. The structure remains because it was overbuilt, designed to endure far longer than its original users. What it once did may no longer be possible, but what it represents still radiates. In the darkness of the king's chamber today, stripped of context and purpose, visitors feel something difficult to articulate. Sound behaves strangely. Presence feels magnified. Time seems uncertain. These sensations are echoes, not accidents. They hint at an intention that cannot be fully erased. The Great Pyramid may no longer initiate gods, but it continues to challenge assumptions. Not because it hides answers, but because it suggests that ancient humanity may have understood the human mind as deeply as it understood stone, and may have built accordingly. When the pyramid is viewed as a device rather than a monument, its silence begins to make sense. Machines do not announce themselves once they are no longer powered. They wait, inert, their logic preserved in form alone. To understand why such a structure would exist at all, attention must move beyond Egypt and beyond dynasties, into a period where history dissolves into myth and memory. Around 10,500 BCE, the planet entered a phase of extreme instability. This was the end of the last ice age, a time when vast ice sheets collapsed, sea levels rose by more than 100 meters, and coastlines were erased within generations. Meltwater pulses flooded lowlands. Weather systems reorganized violently. What had been stable for thousands of years changed rapidly enough to overwhelm cultures adapted to older conditions. Geological records confirm this disruption, but human memory preserves it differently. Across the world, civilizations separated by oceans tell strikingly similar stories. A great flood, a lost age of gods or wise ancestors, a sudden destruction followed by a long descent into hardship. These are not marginal myths. They sit at the foundations of cultures, repeated with local variations but shared emotional weight. In Mesopotamia, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts a deluge sent to wipe out humanity, survived only by those warned in advance. In India, the Matsya Purana describes a catastrophic flood ending a previous age. In the Americas, Mesoamerican traditions speak of earlier worlds destroyed by water. Plato's account of Atlantis, passed down from Egyptian priests, describes a powerful civilization that fell in a single day and night of earthquakes and inundation, long before classical Greece. These stories are often dismissed as metaphor, but metaphor does not require such consistency. Memory does. Oral traditions preserve emotional truth, even when technical details fade. They encode warning, loss, and survival. If a highly advanced society existed before this cataclysm, its material traces would be hardest to find precisely where such a flood would strike first. Coastlines, river valleys, fertile plains. Stone structures on high ground would stand a better chance. The Giza Plateau sits above flood level, anchored to bedrock. It is not an intuitive place for the origin of civilization, but it is an ideal place to preserve something meant to endure disaster. If the builders of Giza anticipated catastrophe, they would not write their knowledge in books or fragile materials. They would encode it in geometry, astronomy, and stone. Under this interpretation, Giza becomes a message rather than a residence. Its alignments mark a date. Its form reflects a cosmic order. Its scale ensures survival. It does not explain itself because it was not meant for those who built it. It was meant for those who came after. Ancient Egyptian tradition speaks of Zep Tepi, the first time, an era when gods ruled the land and established order before the reign of human kings. These gods were not abstract forces. They walked, taught, and governed. After their departure, kingship passed to humans who attempted to maintain the inherited order. This narrative is not presented as metaphor within Egyptian culture. It is treated as history. The Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus, are described as semi-divine beings who ruled Egypt for thousands of years before the first dynasty. Later kings traced their legitimacy back to these figures, not as myths, but as predecessors. Such stories may preserve distorted memories of an earlier elite, technologically or cognitively advanced, whose knowledge became mythologized as divinity once it was no longer understood. If such a group survived the cataclysm, their priorities would not be empire or expansion. They would be preservation. They would seed knowledge where it could take root again. They would choose locations already charged with meaning and resilience. Egypt, with its predictable Nile floods and stable climate after the upheaval, would be an ideal cradle for rebirth. This would explain why Egyptian civilization appears suddenly, already mature. Writing, architecture, theology, and administration emerge with remarkable coherence. There is development, but not from nothing. The culture behaves like a system, recovering lost instructions, rather than inventing from scratch. The pyramids then become anchors of continuity. The Fourth Dynasty did not create them in isolation. They reactivated them symbolically, restoring casing stones, realigning passages, embedding their own theology into a structure far older than their lineage. Khufu's name on the monument would not signify authorship. It would signify stewardship. This also explains why the most advanced stonework appears early and is never surpassed. Knowledge inherited but incompletely understood cannot be improved upon. It can only be maintained, imitated, and eventually degraded. Over time, what was once functional becomes ceremonial. What was once precise becomes symbolic. The pyramid remains, but its purpose fades into ritual memory. The disappearance of advanced techniques after the Old Kingdom fits this pattern. Without the original context, without the full system, later builders worked with what they could manage. They built smaller, less precise monuments. They shifted toward decoration and inscription because meaning had moved from function to story. Seen through this lens, ancient Egypt becomes a civilization built around a relic. Its religion, kingship, and cosmology orbit a structure that no longer worked, but still commanded reverence. The Great Pyramid was not a tomb because death was never its focus. It was a survivor of a world-ending event, carrying fragments of a forgotten science intertwined with a forgotten spirituality. This does not require believing in supernatural gods or lost magic. It requires accepting that human history may be longer, more complex, and less linear than commonly taught. Knowledge can rise, fall, and rise again. Progress is not guaranteed. It is fragile. The builders of Giza may have known this. They may have understood that memory fades faster than stone. If so, their greatest achievement was not the pyramid itself, but the idea of embedding meaning into the planet, trusting that one day someone would notice the patterns and realize that the past is deeper than it appears. The desert night returns, quiet and indifferent. The stars wheel slowly overhead, shifted now from their ancient positions. The monument remains fixed, waiting. Not as a riddle demanding an answer, but as a reminder that civilization may have already reached heights we are only beginning to imagine, and that traces of that ascent still stand beneath our feet. If a forgotten civilization left its mark at Giza, its disappearance becomes as important as its achievements. Civilizations do not simply vanish without consequence. They fracture, fragment, and leave survivors who carry diluted memories forward. The aftermath of catastrophe reshapes not only landscapes, but human behavior, compressing complex systems into stories, rituals, and symbols that can survive chaos when infrastructure cannot. After the climatic upheavals at the end of the Ice Age, the world entered a long period of recovery. Sea levels stabilized. Rain patterns shifted. Regions that had once been lush became arid. Others, newly watered, invited settlement. Human groups reorganized, forming new identities atop the ruins of older ones. In such conditions, advanced knowledge would not disappear entirely. It would be selectively preserved, simplified, and mythologized. Egypt's earliest dynastic period reflects exactly this process. The first dynasty does not look like a society inventing itself from nothing. It looks like one inheriting structures, symbols, and sacred geography already in place. The concept of divine kingship appears fully formed. The use of monumental stone begins immediately. Sacred alignments and cosmological order are assumed, not debated. These are not experimental ideas. They are inherited certainties. The role of the pharaoh illustrates this inheritance. The king was not merely a ruler, but the living embodiment of Horus, later merging with Osiris after death. This dual identity mirrors initiation traditions found worldwide, where the leader must undergo a transformative ordeal to legitimize authority. If such an ordeal once took place within the Great Pyramid, Its memory would persist long after the practice ended. The title would remain even when the mechanism was gone. Egyptian art reinforces this continuity. Early reliefs and statues show a level of confidence and consistency that suggests a long-established canon. Proportions are fixed. Symbolism is standardized. Innovation is minimal because the system is already complete. This is the behavior of a culture preserving something precious, not inventing freely. The same pattern appears in sacred numbers and geometry. The pyramid's proportions encode mathematical relationships involving pi and the golden ratio, relationships that reappear throughout Egyptian architecture and later sacred traditions. These numbers are not random. They describe cycles, ratios, and harmonics found in nature, in sound, and in orbital mechanics. Such knowledge does not emerge spontaneously. It accumulates through observation over long spans of time. Language itself carries traces of older knowledge. Egyptian hieroglyphs are not phonetic in origin. They are symbolic, layered, and multidimensional. A single sign can represent an object, a sound, and a concept simultaneously. This kind of writing suggests a worldview where meaning is not linear but interconnected. It is well suited to preserving complex ideas through metaphor when direct explanation is no longer possible. Myth becomes the vessel for science when precision is lost. Stories of gods traveling across the sky preserve astronomical knowledge. Tales of divine floods encode climate memory. Legends of creation from chaos mirror geological upheaval. Over generations, technical understanding fades, but narrative survives because it can be remembered and retold without tools. This process is visible beyond Egypt. In the Andes, megalithic sites like Sacsayhuaman and Puma Punku display stonework rivaling or exceeding that of Giza, with polygonal blocks fitted so precisely that blades cannot penetrate the joints. Local traditions attribute these structures to gods or giants from a distant age, not to the ancestors of the people who later lived there. The builders are remembered as others. In Mesopotamia, early kings claimed descent from antediluvian rulers who reigned for impossibly long spans of time. These reign lengths are often dismissed as symbolic, but they may represent eras rather than individuals, preserving a sense of deep antiquity. The message is consistent. Civilization did not begin with us. We inherited its remains. Under this interpretation, the Great Pyramid becomes a central node in a global pattern rather than an isolated anomaly. It represents one expression of a lost system adapted to local geography and belief. The differences between regions reflect cultural variation. The similarities point to shared origin. As time passed, the surviving knowledge holders would face a dilemma. Advanced technology without supporting infrastructure becomes dangerous. Tools cannot be maintained. Systems cannot be powered. Attempts to replicate without understanding lead to failure. The safest path is restraint. Knowledge is guarded, ritualized, and gradually restricted to symbolic use. This may explain why Egypt, despite its sophistication, never pursued industrial expansion or technological escalation. Stability was valued over innovation. Order over experimentation. The culture was conservative by design, shaped by a memory of collapse that taught caution. The pyramids themselves embody this restraint. They are massive, static, and final. They do not invite modification. They impose limits. Once built, they resist change. In a world recovering from disaster, permanence would be the highest virtue. Over centuries, even this restraint eroded. Political pressures shifted priorities. Resources were redirected. Knowledge fragmented further. By the time of the Middle and New Kingdoms, the pyramids were already ancient. Their purpose was obscure. They were respected, visited, and reused symbolically, but no longer understood functionally. Later, cultures would inherit only fragments. Greek philosophers visited Egypt and recorded echoes of ancient wisdom without grasping its origin. Medieval travelers marveled at the pyramids, but projected their own beliefs onto them. Modern archaeology stripped away myth, but replaced it with linear narratives that may be equally incomplete. What remains constant is the structure itself. It does not argue. It does not persuade. It simply exists, its form unchanged while interpretations rise and fall around it. The Great Pyramid has outlived the civilization that built it, the one that inherited it, and the many that tried to explain it away. If it was meant as a message across time, its creators chose wisely. Stone speaks slowly, but it speaks to anyone willing to listen long enough. The message is not written in words, but in relationships between earth and sky, matter and mind, destruction and renewal. In this sense, the Great Pyramid is not an answer, but a checkpoint in human memory. It marks a point where knowledge once reached a peak, fell, and left behind a reminder that such heights are possible. Whether that knowledge will ever be recovered is uncertain. But its existence suggests that human potential has already exceeded what modern history is comfortable admitting. The desert wind continues to sweep across Giza, carrying sand that buries and reveals in endless cycles. Beneath it all, the monument endures, patient, awaiting a future capable of understanding what the past chose not to explain directly. As layers of inheritance, myth, and memory accumulate around Giza, attention inevitably turns inward, toward the human impulse to rationalize what refuses to fit. Modern archaeology, like any discipline, is shaped by its assumptions. It seeks continuity, gradual development, and explanatory chains that move forward in time. The Great Pyramid resists this approach not because evidence is lacking, but because the evidence points in multiple directions at once. The orthodox model depends heavily on linear progression. Stone tools improve, techniques evolve, societies grow more complex. In most cases, this framework works. At Giza, however, the pattern bends. The most complex structures appear early. Later constructions are smaller, less precise, and more decorative. Instead of improvement, there is simplification. This inversion challenges expectations and forces uncomfortable questions about what progress actually looks like. Attempts to resolve this tension often rely on compartmentalization. Precision stonework is attributed to exceptional skill. Astronomical alignments are framed as symbolic coincidence. Geological anomalies are explained through localized effects. Each issue is addressed separately, preventing them from converging into a single disruptive conclusion. This method preserves stability but sacrifices coherence. Yet when all anomalies are viewed together, a different picture emerges. The Great Pyramid's geometry, material science, acoustic properties, astronomical correlations, and geological context align toward a unified intent. That intent appears less concerned with burial and more concerned with interaction. Interaction between earth and sky, between vibration and matter, between structure and consciousness. This does not require the builders to possess modern technology in recognizable form. It requires them to understand principles. Ancient knowledge often prioritized principles over mechanisms. A society can exploit resonance without equations, electricity without wires, and astronomy without telescopes. Empirical observation, refined over generations, can achieve results that appear impossible when judged by contemporary standards alone. Resistance to this idea often stems from fear of implication rather than evidence. Accepting a deeper antiquity for advanced knowledge destabilizes the narrative of inevitable progress. It suggests that humanity has already climbed high enough to fall hard, and that modern civilization may not be unprecedented but cyclical. The concept of cycles is deeply embedded in ancient thought. Egyptian cosmology is not linear, it is regenerative. Time is divided into ages that rise, collapse, and renew. Creation is not a singular event, but an ongoing process of ordering chaos. Within this worldview, the loss of a high civilization is not a failure. It is expected. Modern culture, by contrast, treats collapse as anomaly. It views technological advancement as irreversible. This difference in worldview shapes interpretation. What ancient societies encoded as warning, modern ones dismiss as myth. The Great Pyramid stands at the intersection of these perspectives. To the ancient mind, it may have represented continuity through catastrophe, a stabilizing anchor in a turbulent world. To the modern mind, it becomes an embarrassment, an outlier that must be explained away or minimized to protect prevailing models. Even language reveals this tension. The word primitive is often applied to ancient cultures, not as a technical descriptor, but as a value judgment. It implies inferiority. Yet the precision embedded in Giza contradicts this assumption. The builders may have lacked certain technologies, but they compensated with others we do not fully understand. This does not diminish modern science, it expands it. It suggests that human ingenuity expresses itself differently under different constraints. Scarcity breeds innovation just as abundance does. Knowledge shaped by survival may prioritize resilience over efficiency, harmony over dominance. The Great Pyramid's endurance is its most radical feature. It has survived climate shifts, political upheavals, religious revolutions, and cultural amnesia. It remains structurally sound after more than 4,000 years of exposure, even longer if its core predates dynastic Egypt. Such durability is not accidental. It reflects a design philosophy centered on permanence. This permanence contrasts sharply with modern construction, which prioritizes speed, cost, and planned obsolescence. Ancient builders invested immense resources into singular projects intended to outlast generations. This suggests a different relationship to time, one less concerned with immediate utility and more concerned with legacy. Legacy, however, does not mean vanity. A tomb glorifies an individual. A machine or initiatory structure serves a process. The Great Pyramid's anonymity supports the latter interpretation. There is no inscription claiming authorship within its main chambers. The monument does not announce a king. It announces a principle. That principle may be memory itself. Not memory as nostalgia, but memory as continuity of knowledge. By encoding relationships rather than instructions, the builders ensured that future observers could rediscover meaning through observation, not obedience. The pyramid does not tell anyone what to believe. It invites measurement. This may explain why it continues to attract attention across cultures and centuries. It does not belong to any one tradition. It predates religious boundaries. It speaks in mathematics, physics, and geometry, languages that remain intelligible regardless of belief. Critics argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The Great Pyramid provides extraordinary evidence. What is contested is interpretation. Evidence alone does not force consensus. Worldview mediates meaning. The reluctance to revise timelines is not unique to Egyptology. It appears whenever foundational assumptions are challenged. History is not just a record of the past. It is a framework for identity. Altering it alters how humanity understands itself. If advanced knowledge existed before recorded history, then humanity is not on a simple upward trajectory. It is on a path marked by ascent, collapse, and rediscovery. This perspective encourages humility rather than triumphalism. The Great Pyramid, in this sense, is not a threat to modern understanding. It is a corrective. It reminds observers that knowledge can be lost, that resilience matters, and that survival may depend as much on wisdom as on power. As night deepens over the plateau, the monument absorbs starlight as it has for millennia. Its edges blur slightly in the darkness, but its outline remains unmistakable. It does not demand belief. It endures. What future generations will make of it remains uncertain, but its continued presence ensures that the question of human potential will never fully settle. Somewhere between stone and sky, the past waits, not to be worshipped or dismissed, but to be understood on its own terms. As the pyramid's possible functions recede into deep time, another pattern emerges, one that connects structure to survival rather than ritual alone. Civilizations that endure catastrophe do not merely rebuild physically, they encode lessons meant to prevent repetition. The Great Pyramid, when viewed through this lens, begins to resemble a warning system as much as a legacy, a form of knowledge storage that does not rely on language, politics, or tradition. Unlike texts, stone does not decay quickly. Unlike oral memory, geometry does not mutate with retelling. The builders of Giza appear to have chosen permanence deliberately, embedding information in proportions, alignments, and location. This information is not explicit. It cannot be read casually. It must be rediscovered through measurement, observation, and synthesis. That requirement alone filters for a certain level of cognitive maturity in those who encounter it. The plateau's layout ties together multiple cycles, the precession of the equinoxes, solar and stellar risings, geological ages, and climatic shifts. These cycles are not human inventions. They operate regardless of belief or culture. By aligning monuments to them, the builders anchored memory to natural law rather than myth. The pyramid becomes a clock that measures not hours or years, but epochs. Precession is particularly significant. This slow wobble of Earth's axis governs the long-term movement of the stars and defines ages lasting thousands of years. Most ancient cultures noticed it only indirectly, if at all. To intentionally encode precessional knowledge into architecture implies observation over many generations. It implies a civilization that thought in terms of millennia rather than lifetimes. This long view aligns with the idea of catastrophe awareness. A society that experienced near total collapse would understand the importance of long cycles. It would recognize that climate stability is temporary and that extreme change can return. Encoding this awareness into monuments would be an act of responsibility rather than arrogance. The pyramid's relationship to water reinforces this idea. The Nile's annual flooding was the foundation of Egyptian agriculture, yet the deeper memory of overwhelming floods persisted in myth. The subterranean chamber beneath the Great Pyramid, connected to groundwater, suggests an intentional relationship with water as both life-giver and destructive force. The structure acknowledges water's dual role without romanticizing it. This balance reflects a mature ecological understanding. Rather than attempting to dominate nature, the builders integrated their structures with it. The pyramid does not fight erosion entirely, it accommodates it. Its core remains stable even as outer layers degrade. This is not the design of a monument meant only to impress contemporaries. It is the design of something meant to persist under stress. Modern civilization often assumes that advanced technology equates to control. The builders of Giza may have understood something different, that survival depends on alignment rather than dominance. Their technology, whatever its exact form, appears to have been subtle, working with natural forces instead of against them. This philosophy extends to the absence of overt instruction. If the pyramid was meant to warn future civilizations about cycles of collapse, explicit messages would risk misinterpretation or destruction. Implicit encoding avoids this. Only those capable of understanding the underlying principles would extract the meaning. Others would simply see stone. This approach parallels genetic information storage in biology. DNA does not explain itself. It encodes potential that activates under the right conditions. The pyramid may function similarly, holding dormant information that becomes legible only when a civilization reaches a certain threshold of knowledge. The rediscovery of this information may not be accidental. Modern science, with its ability to model climate cycles, astronomical movements, and geological processes, is uniquely positioned to recognize the patterns embedded at Giza. This convergence suggests timing. The message becomes readable when it is most relevant. Current climate instability echoes ancient patterns. Rapid warming, rising seas, and ecosystem disruption mirror conditions at the end of the last ice age. The difference lies in scale and speed. Humanity now possesses tools capable of amplifying catastrophe rather than merely enduring it. In this context, the pyramid's silent endurance takes on renewed significance. It does not offer solutions, it offers perspective. It demonstrates that advanced societies have faced collapse before, and that knowledge can survive if encoded wisely. It also demonstrates that technological sophistication does not guarantee permanence. Wisdom, restraint, and long-term thinking are equally necessary. The Fourth Dynasty Egyptians, inheritors of this structure, may have understood this implicitly. Their culture emphasized balance, order, and continuity. Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance, governed ethics, governance, and cosmology. This focus on equilibrium, rather than expansion, may reflect a residual memory of what happens when balance is lost. As centuries passed, even this memory diluted. Ritual replaced understanding. Symbol replaced function. The pyramid remained, but its deeper meaning receded into myth. Yet myth preserved enough to keep curiosity alive. The story did not end. It went dormant. The modern tendency to separate science from meaning complicates interpretation. Ancient builders did not divide knowledge this way. Astronomy, geology, acoustics, and psychology were facets of the same inquiry: how humans fit into the cosmos. The pyramid expresses this integration physically. Seen in this light, the Great Pyramid is less a relic of lost technology and more a testament to lost priorities. It reflects a worldview that valued endurance over novelty, alignment over exploitation, and continuity over conquest. These values are not outdated. They are increasingly relevant. The pyramid's survival is not proof of superiority. It is proof of foresight. Its builders anticipated change, loss, and misunderstanding. They built something that could survive all three. In doing so, they entrusted the future with the responsibility of interpretation. As dawn approaches and light returns to the plateau, the pyramid's edges sharpen once more. It stands unchanged, indifferent to the age that surrounds it. Whether its message will be understood or ignored remains uncertain. But its presence ensures that the possibility of remembering remains open, waiting for a civilization willing to listen without assuming it already knows the end of the story. As the idea of encoded memory settles into focus, attention shifts to the human cost of forgetting. Knowledge does not vanish cleanly, it fractures. When systems collapse, survivors carry fragments forward, often without context. Over generations, those fragments harden into belief, ritual, and authority. What was once functional becomes sacred. What was once understood becomes unquestionable. Ancient Egypt exhibits this transition with unusual clarity. Its earliest dynasties present a civilization already saturated with symbolism, order, and cosmic justification. Kingship is absolute from the start. The pharaoh does not rule by consensus or conquest alone. He rules by alignment with the cosmos. This is not political theater. It is metaphysical inheritance. The language of divine descent appears immediately. Pharaohs are not elected leaders elevated to godhood. They are gods incarnate by right. This belief makes sense only if there was once a tangible process that demonstrated such transformation. Without a lived mechanism, the claim would ring hollow. Ritual alone cannot sustain absolute authority indefinitely. Experience must have preceded myth. The Great Pyramid, interpreted as an initiatory structure, offers that missing mechanism. A king who had undergone a controlled confrontation with death and emerged transformed would command loyalty not through fear alone, but through perceived transcendence. His authority would be unquestionable because it was earned in a way others could not replicate. When that mechanism ceased to function, authority remained, but justification shifted. Lineage replaced experience. Titles replaced transformation. The king was still Horus, but Horus was no longer encountered directly. Religion filled the gap left by lost technology. This pattern repeats throughout history. When tools disappear, their effects are preserved symbolically. Fire becomes sacred when its method of creation is forgotten. Medicine becomes ritual when its mechanisms are obscured. Architecture becomes monument when function fades. Egypt's obsession with preservation reflects this shift. Mummification, grave goods, and elaborate tombs emerge fully developed after the era of the Great Pyramids. These practices attempt to externalize immortality. If transformation can no longer be achieved through initiation, survival must be attempted through preservation of the body and identity. The irony is striking. The Great Pyramid contains no body, yet later Egypt becomes obsessed with bodies. The earlier culture may have sought transcendence. The later one sought continuity. Both aimed at eternity, but by different means. This transition mirrors a broader human pattern. When direct access to altered states or expanded awareness is lost, societies often externalize meaning into law, hierarchy, and dogma. Authority becomes fixed. Innovation becomes dangerous. Stability becomes sacred. Egypt's long endurance may owe much to this conservatism. Change was carefully controlled. Innovation occurred slowly. This reduced risk in an unpredictable world. But it also locked the culture into forms that no longer reflected original understanding. The pyramids themselves became untouchable. Later kings did not dare replicate them at the same scale. Smaller pyramids and different tomb styles emerged, not because resources were lacking, but because the knowledge to activate the original form was gone. Building something one does not understand invites catastrophe. Instead, Egypt turned inward. Art became formulaic. Texts became prescriptive. The afterlife was mapped in increasing detail, perhaps compensating for the loss of experiential certainty. The journey once taken by the living was now imagined for the dead. This shift from lived transformation to symbolic promise is subtle but profound. It marks the moment when a civilization stops exploring and starts preserving. Both impulses have value, but they serve different futures. Outside Egypt, similar transitions appear. In Mesopotamia, early myths speak of gods teaching humans the arts of civilization. Later societies codify these teachings into law and ritual. In India, the Vedas describe experiential knowledge later systematized into doctrine. Everywhere, the pattern holds. Experience precedes structure. Structure outlives understanding. The Great Pyramid stands at the threshold of this transition. It represents a point where knowledge was still embodied, still enacted, still functional. Its silence today is not emptiness. It is residue, the imprint of a process that once required human participation. Modern observers often underestimate the sophistication of ancient psychology. Altered states were not accidents. They were cultivated, respected, and integrated into social structures. Initiation rites across cultures share common elements: darkness, isolation, sound, fasting, and symbolic death. The pyramid concentrates all of these elements into a single engineered environment. If such environments once existed more widely, their loss would dramatically alter human consciousness over time. Societies would become more externally focused, more hierarchical, more dependent on symbols rather than direct experience. Authority would centralize. Meaning would be mediated. This trajectory aligns uncomfortably well with the arc of recorded history. As time progresses, institutions grow stronger while individual experiential access weakens. Religion becomes centralized. Knowledge becomes specialized. Participation becomes passive. The Great Pyramid, then, may represent not only a lost technology, but a lost mode of being. A time when transformation was communal, structured, and intentional, rather than accidental or marginal. Its disappearance would leave a psychological vacuum that later systems struggled to fill. Seen this way, the pyramid is not an isolated wonder. It is a hinge in human development. Before it, knowledge may have been integrated and experiential. After it, knowledge becomes divided, externalized, and hierarchical. This does not imply decline in all respects. Later civilizations achieved extraordinary feats in art, philosophy, and governance. But the center shifted. The axis of meaning moved from inner transformation to outer control. The lingering fascination with Giza may stem from this unresolved tension. Modern humanity, armed with unprecedented technological power, faces a crisis of meaning eerily similar to ancient ones. External mastery has outpaced internal wisdom. Structures grow more complex while individuals feel increasingly disconnected. The Great Pyramid offers no solutions, but it suggests a possibility. The technology and consciousness were once pursued together. That architecture was designed not only to shelter bodies, but to shape minds. That survival depended as much on inner alignment as on outer resilience. As shadows lengthen across the plateau and the monument cools under the night sky, its presence remains unchanged. It does not instruct. It does not warn explicitly. It simply stands as evidence that another way of organizing knowledge once existed, and that its remnants still exert a quiet pull on the human imagination. Whether that way can be recovered, adapted, or even recognized is uncertain. But the pyramid's endurance ensures that the question itself cannot be buried. It waits, patiently, as it always has. The final pieces of the puzzle lie not in stone or sky, but in the subtle traces left where knowledge thins into legend. When civilizations lose the ability to use a system, they rarely abandon it outright. They surround it with taboo. They restrict access. They reinterpret danger as sanctity. Over time, what was once functional becomes forbidden, and what was once understood becomes untouchable. Giza shows clear signs of this transition. By the late Old Kingdom, access to the Great Pyramid's internal chambers was no longer routine. Blocking stones were sealed, passages were concealed. The structure was protected, not utilized. This was not simple security against grave robbers. It was institutional distancing. The pyramid had become something that should not be interfered with. Later Egyptian texts reinforce this attitude. Sacred knowledge is repeatedly described as dangerous when misused. Priests are warned that certain rituals, sounds, or names can unbalance Ma'at if performed incorrectly. This language suggests memory of a time when misuse had consequences beyond theology. Power without understanding is framed as cosmic risk. The priesthood emerges as a class not merely of worshippers, but of custodians. Their role is preservation, not experimentation. They maintain rituals whose origins they no longer fully grasp. Precision gives way to repetition. Accuracy gives way to obedience. This is how systems survive after comprehension fades. The Great Pyramid's continued presence within this religious framework is revealing. It is revered but not replicated. Its scale is acknowledged but never challenged. Even powerful kings avoid claiming it outright. Khufu's association with the pyramid appears carefully bounded. His name appears in construction marks, not in grand proclamations. Ownership is implied, not asserted. This restraint may reflect awareness. To claim authorship of something beyond one's understanding is to invite comparison, and comparison invites failure. Better to inherit than to compete. Better to guard than to repeat. As centuries passed, Egypt's spiritual center shifted. Temples replaced pyramids as focal points of religious life. These temples are intricate, symbolic, and richly decorated. They emphasize procession, hierarchy, and ritual drama. The inner sanctum becomes the place of mystery, not the structure itself. This shift marks a fundamental change. Sacred space moves from environment to narrative. Experience becomes mediated by priesthood. Transformation becomes promised rather than enacted. The divine becomes distant, approached through intermediaries. The pyramids, in contrast, offer no intermediaries. they impose conditions directly. Stone does not negotiate. Resonance does not require belief. Geometry does not respond to prayer. This directness may have become unacceptable in a society increasingly organized around control and continuity. The loss of direct experience would reshape theology itself. Gods once encountered through altered states become characters in stories. Myths expand to fill the gap left by lost practice. The duat becomes a place reached after death rather than a state navigated in life. This reinterpretation is subtle and gradual. No decree announces it. No revolt demands it. It happens because memory fades unevenly. Techniques disappear before meanings. The shell survives longer than the core. Outside Egypt, similar processes unfold. In Mesoamerica, early structures suggest astronomical and acoustic sophistication later replaced by overt ritual sacrifice. In Europe, megalithic sites aligned to solstices predate later religious systems that reinterpret them symbolically. Everywhere, the pattern holds. Function precedes myth. Myth preserves function imperfectly. The Great Pyramid stands as the most extreme example of this trajectory. Its sheer scale prevented complete erasure. Even stripped of purpose, it remained impossible to ignore. It became a gravitational center for speculation, reverence, and fear. Fear is often overlooked in discussions of ancient monuments. Structures that once wielded power inspire caution when their operation is no longer understood. Legends of curses, divine retribution, or forbidden knowledge arise naturally. They discourage experimentation while preserving distance. Accounts from later periods reflect this unease. Ancient writers describe the pyramids with awe, but also confusion. They speculate wildly about purpose, origin, and meaning. None describe them as active systems. By then, whatever once occurred inside had ceased. Modern exploration reopens these sealed spaces physically, but not conceptually. Tourists walk passages once reserved for initiation, unaware of the conditions originally required. Without darkness, silence, isolation, and preparation, the chambers reveal little. Context matters more than access. This disconnect fuels skepticism. When nothing happens, observers assume nothing ever did. But absence of effect under changed conditions does not disprove original function. A musical instrument does not sing when struck incorrectly. The challenge, then, is not to recreate the past, but to understand its intent. The Great Pyramid was not built for mass participation. It was selective, controlled, and rare. Its impact would be subtle but profound, shaping leadership rather than society at large. This model aligns with the stability of ancient Egypt. Power was centralized. Change was slow. Authority endured for millennia. Such endurance requires more than force. It requires legitimacy rooted in something perceived as beyond human manipulation. Once that root withered, Egypt adapted by emphasizing tradition. Stability continued, but innovation declined. Eventually, external forces overtook the civilization, and Egypt became a repository of memory rather than a source of transformation. The Great Pyramid outlasted all of this. Conquest, conversion, and reinterpretation failed to erase it. Its meaning shifted repeatedly, but its form resisted assimilation. It remained other, a reminder that something had come before. In modern times, the pyramid occupies a peculiar place. It is simultaneously overexposed and underunderstood. Images are ubiquitous. Interpretations are endless. Yet its deeper implications are rarely confronted without discomfort. Accepting that the pyramid represents lost capability challenges modern identity. It undermines assumptions of uniqueness and inevitability. It suggests that humanity has already reached thresholds it failed to sustain. This realization need not inspire despair. It can inspire caution. The past does not demand repetition. It offers perspective. The pyramid does not accuse. It observes. Its builders may have known that future civilizations would struggle to interpret their work. They may have accepted that misunderstanding was inevitable. What mattered was endurance, not clarity. As long as the structure stands, the possibility of re-evaluation remains. Each generation brings new tools, new frameworks, new humility. The pyramid does not change. We do. In this sense, it fulfills its role perfectly, not as a monument to power, death, or vanity, but as a fixed point against which human understanding measures itself again and again across the slow turning of ages. The persistence of Giza into the present era forces a confrontation not with ancient builders, but with modern priorities. The monument has survived conquest, neglect, religious transformation, and scientific scrutiny. Yet it remains fundamentally misaligned with contemporary categories. It is too precise to be primitive, too old to be advanced by accepted standards, and too silent to resolve its own contradictions. In this tension, it exposes the limitations of certainty itself. Modern analysis tends to isolate variables. Stone is studied separately from sound, astronomy separately from psychology, engineering separately from ritual. Giza refuses this separation. Its design integrates domains that modern disciplines treat as unrelated. Geometry governs acoustics. Astronomy informs placement. Material science intersects with perception. The structure behaves as a system rather than a collection of parts. This systems-based design suggests a culture comfortable with synthesis. Knowledge was not fragmented into specialties. It was unified by purpose. That purpose appears neither purely religious nor purely technological. It occupies a middle ground where experience, environment, and meaning reinforce one another. The decline of such synthesis may be the most significant loss implied by the pyramid's existence. As civilizations grow, they often specialize. Specialization increases efficiency, but reduces coherence. Experts know more about less. Systems become harder to understand as wholes. Eventually, no one sees the entire picture. Ancient builders may have operated under different constraints. Limited tools forced holistic thinking. Observation replaced abstraction. Long-term survival demanded integration rather than optimization. These conditions produce a different kind of intelligence, one less visible in artifacts but deeply embedded in form. Giza's design reflects this intelligence. The pyramid's shape is not arbitrary. It balances stability with efficiency, maximizing volume while minimizing surface exposure. Its slope distributes weight evenly. Its internal chambers are placed where stresses resolve naturally. These choices suggest deep empirical understanding accumulated over generations. The astronomical correlations extend this understanding beyond earthbound concerns. Aligning architecture with precessional cycles requires patience and continuity. Such alignment cannot be achieved within a single lifetime. It implies knowledge transmitted accurately across centuries. This transmission could not rely solely on text. It required culture, ritual, and shared observation. When catastrophe interrupts transmission, only the most robust carriers survive. Stories mutate, tools rust, structures endure. The Great Pyramid is such a carrier. It holds relationships rather than instructions, preserving patterns that can be rediscovered when conditions allow. Rediscovery, however, is not guaranteed. It requires curiosity unbound by dogma. It requires humility to accept that ancestors may have known things we do not. It requires willingness to hold uncertainty without forcing resolution. Modern culture struggles with this stance. Uncertainty is often treated as failure rather than opportunity. Explanations are preferred over questions. Consensus is valued over exploration. In this environment, anomalies are smoothed away rather than examined. Giza remains anomalous. Each attempt to normalize it reveals new friction. Engineering models explain some features but not others. Religious models capture symbolism but not precision. Geological models clarify erosion but challenge timelines. No single framework satisfies all evidence. This may be the point. The pyramid does not invite a single explanation. It invites integration. It asks observers to step outside disciplinary comfort and consider that ancient knowledge may not map neatly onto modern categories. The resistance to this idea is understandable. Accepting it destabilizes identity. It reframes history as cyclical rather than progressive. It implies that collapse is not aberration, but pattern. Such implications are unsettling, especially in an era facing its own global instabilities. Yet the value of the past lies not in reassurance, but in instruction. The Great Pyramid does not promise safety. It demonstrates endurance. It shows what can survive when much else fails. It hints at priorities that favor longevity over speed, coherence over growth. The Fourth Dynasty. Egyptians, whatever their role in the pyramid's final form, appear to have recognized this. Their culture emphasized balance, continuity, and restraint. Innovation occurred, but within bounds. This ethos may reflect inherited caution rather than stagnation. Over time, even caution erodes. Empires rise and fall. Knowledge fragments. The pyramid remains. It becomes a mirror reflecting the assumptions of each era that encounters it. In the modern world, the mirror reveals a paradox. Humanity possesses unprecedented analytical power, yet struggles to agree on basic interpretations of its past. Data accumulates faster than synthesis. Information multiplies while meaning thins. The pyramid challenges this trajectory. It suggests that meaning emerges from relationships, not accumulation. From alignment, not dominance. From patience, not acceleration. Its builders may have understood that survival depends on remembering what matters when systems fail. They chose stone because stone forgets slowly. They chose the sky because it changes predictably. They chose geometry because it transcends language. The result is not a message that can be translated directly. It is a framework that rewards engagement. Those who measure, observe, and correlate begin to glimpse coherence. Those who demand immediate answers find frustration. This asymmetry protects the structure's purpose. It filters engagement by intention. The pyramid does not cater to belief. It responds to inquiry. As humanity confronts challenges reminiscent of ancient upheavals, climate instability, resource strain, and social fragmentation, the relevance of such a structure increases, not as a solution, but as a reminder that endurance requires foresight. The Great Pyramid has already witnessed one civilizational horizon pass. It may witness another. Its presence does not guarantee survival. It guarantees memory. Whether modern civilization chooses to learn from that memory remains uncertain. The pyramid does not judge. It stands. In the end, its greatest achievement may not be what it did, but what it continues to do. Compel reflection across millennia, resisting reduction, inviting synthesis, and holding open the possibility that humanity's deepest knowledge lies not ahead, but behind, waiting to be recognized without fear. As the pyramid's long shadow stretches into the modern age, the final challenge it presents is not technical, historical, or even philosophical. It is ethical. What does a civilization do when confronted with evidence that its story of progress may be incomplete? The Great Pyramid does not merely complicate timelines, it complicates responsibility. If advanced knowledge existed before and was lost, then collapse is not theoretical, it is precedent. This realization reframes the present. Modern society often assumes that intelligence and technology guarantee survival. Giza suggests otherwise. It implies that intelligence without restraint can be temporary, and that survival depends on values as much as capability. The builders of the pyramid appear to have understood limits. Their work shows no interest in excess decoration, personal glorification, or expansion. The structure is austere. Its power lies in proportion and placement, not ornament. This restraint stands in contrast to later monumental traditions that emphasize conquest and dominance. Restraint implies choice. It suggests a society that recognized thresholds it should not cross. Whether those thresholds were environmental, psychological, or technological remains unclear. What is clear is that the pyramid was built to endure, not to grow. It represents culmination rather than ambition. Modern civilization, by contrast, is built on acceleration. Growth is treated as virtue. Expansion is assumed to be natural. Limits are framed as obstacles rather than safeguards. This mindset produces remarkable achievements, but also profound instability. Systems grow faster than their capacity to manage consequences. The Great Pyramid offers an alternative model. It embodies sufficiency. Once completed, it required no upgrades, no expansions, no improvements. Its function, whatever its full extent, was complete. There is a lesson here that extends beyond archaeology. Ancient cultures often framed wisdom as knowing when to stop. Myths warn against hubris, not because ambition is evil, but because imbalance invites collapse. The flood stories that echo around the world are not merely about water, they are about excess. Giza's builders may have experienced such excess firsthand. If their civilization fell during the climatic upheavals of the late Ice Age, they would have learned that mastery over nature has limits. Their response was not to rebuild the same systems, but to encode memory of the failure. This memory is not accusatory. It does not blame. It does not threaten. It simply persists. The pyramid does not collapse dramatically. It erodes slowly. It does not punish. It waits. Waiting is an unusual choice. It assumes that future observers will eventually become capable of understanding. It reflects confidence not in power, but in continuity. The builders trusted time more than authority. This trust challenges modern instincts. Contemporary systems rely on enforcement, speed, and control. They assume that meaning must be imposed quickly, or it will be lost. The pyramid assumes the opposite. That meaning emerges slowly, through repeated engagement across generations. Such patience is rare. It requires belief in humanity beyond immediate circumstances. It requires acceptance that one's own civilization may not be the final one. This humility is evident in the pyramid's anonymity. No individual claims it. No face is carved into its surface. It belongs to time, not to a name. This anonymity also protects it. Without a singular author, it resists reduction to biography or ideology. It cannot be dismissed as vanity. It must be addressed as intention. The ethical implication is clear. If knowledge can be lost, then stewardship matters. If civilizations can collapse, then foresight matters. If memory can survive catastrophe, then what is remembered matters most. The Great Pyramid appears to remember relationships rather than instructions. It preserves how things connect, not what to do. This choice avoids prescription. It empowers future observers to adapt insights to their own context. Modern society often seeks solutions rather than understanding. It looks for fixes rather than frameworks. Giza offers no fixes. It offers perspective. It suggests that survival is not achieved through dominance or innovation alone, but through alignment with forces larger than oneself. Alignment requires humility. It requires recognizing that natural cycles cannot be overridden indefinitely. Climate, geology, and cosmic rhythms operate regardless of human preference. Ignoring them invites consequence. The pyramid's astronomical alignments underscore this point. They tie human activity to celestial motion, embedding society within a larger order. This perspective counters the illusion of centrality. Humanity is not the axis. It is a participant. Ethically, this worldview encourages restraint and responsibility. Power is balanced by awareness. Authority is tempered by understanding. Leadership is legitimized through alignment rather than coercion. If the pyramid once served as an initiatory device, its ethical function becomes even clearer. Leaders were required to confront mortality, dissolution, and insignificance before wielding power. Such an ordeal would shape decision-making profoundly. Modern leadership rarely includes comparable experiences. Authority is granted through systems that reward competition, not introspection. The result is power divorced from humility. The Great Pyramid stands as a counterexample. It suggests that true authority arises from understanding limits, not exceeding them. It implies that societies that forget this lesson repeat cycles of collapse. This does not mean the past offers a blueprint. It offers a warning encoded in endurance. The pyramid does not advocate returning to ancient practices. It advocates remembering why restraint mattered. As modern humanity faces challenges that echo ancient cataclysms, rising seas, shifting climates, and systemic fragility, the relevance of such a reminder increases. The question is not whether history will repeat, but whether memory will inform response. The Great Pyramid cannot answer that question. It has already done its part. It endured. It preserved. It waited. The responsibility now lies with those who stand before it, not to worship it, not to dismiss it, but to recognize what it implies. That civilization is not guaranteed. That knowledge is fragile. That survival depends on choices made long before crisis becomes unavoidable. As the monument continues to cast its shadow across the desert, unchanged by the centuries, it offers no comfort and no condemnation. It simply remains, a silent measure against which every civilization must eventually judge itself. As the long arc of interpretation nears its end, the Great Pyramid stands less as an object to be explained and more as a presence to be reckoned with. After layers of theory, resistance, myth, and analysis, one reality remains unchanged. The structure exists beyond any single narrative. It has absorbed every story imposed upon it, and yet remains fundamentally other, unmoved by certainty or doubt. Civilizations tend to explain the past in ways that justify the present. When confidence is high, the past is portrayed as primitive. When anxiety grows, the past is romanticized. Giza has endured both treatments. It has been reduced to brute labor and elevated to supernatural fantasy. Neither extreme captures its character. What the pyramid suggests instead is continuity without assurance. It implies that human capability is not fixed, but contingent. Knowledge can arise, mature, and vanish without leaving a clear lineage. Progress is not a straight line, but a waveform, rising and falling according to conditions that extend beyond human control. This understanding reframes the meaning of loss. Lost knowledge is not failure. It is risk realized. Any system complex enough to transform consciousness or harness natural forces is also complex enough to collapse catastrophically. The pyramid's endurance hints that its builders accepted this risk and planned accordingly. Planning for collapse requires a particular mindset. It requires the humility to acknowledge that one's own civilization may not survive. It requires the courage to invest resources in something whose purpose may not be understood by its immediate inheritors. It requires faith not in continuity of power, but in continuity of awareness. The Great Pyramid embodies this faith. Its scale exceeds practical necessity. Its precision exceeds symbolic requirement. Its restraint exceeds political ambition. These excesses are not waste. They are insurance. They ensure that the structure cannot be ignored, dismantled easily, or repurposed without leaving questions intact. This approach contrasts sharply with modern systems of knowledge storage. Today, information is dense, fast, and fragile. It depends on infrastructure, compatibility, and constant maintenance. When systems fail, data disappears instantly. The pyramid, by contrast, stores little information explicitly, but guarantees that what it stores will persist. Its message is not encoded in language, which fractures across cultures and eras. It is encoded in relationships that remain intelligible as long as humans can observe, measure, and think. Geometry does not require translation. Astronomy does not require belief. Stone does not require electricity. This design choice suggests that the builders prioritized future accessibility over present clarity. They accepted that their intent might be misunderstood for millennia, trusting that eventual rediscovery would matter more than immediate comprehension. Such patience is rare. It implies a civilization thinking beyond generational memory, beyond dynastic legacy, beyond even cultural survival. It implies identification not with a nation or species, but with consciousness itself as a continuing phenomenon. The Great Pyramid thus becomes less about Egypt and more about humanity. It is not a national monument, it is a planetary one. Its alignments, materials, and location speak to Earth as a system, not to a people alone. This universality explains its persistent pull. People from every culture feel drawn to it, regardless of belief. The pyramid does not demand allegiance. It invites contemplation. It operates at a scale where personal ideology dissolves. Modern debates about its purpose often reveal more about contemporary anxieties than ancient intent. Some seek validation of technological superiority. Others seek confirmation of lost golden ages. Still others seek mystery for its own sake. The pyramid accommodates all these projections without resolving them. This ambiguity may be intentional. A message that dictates interpretation risks rejection. A message that invites interpretation survives. The pyramid's silence is not absence, it is openness. At this stage, the question is no longer who built it or how. Those questions, while important, circle around a deeper one. What kind of thinking produced it? The answer appears to be integrative, restrained, and future-oriented. A mode of thought that valued alignment over domination and endurance over expansion. Such thinking is not foreign to humanity. It appears sporadically across cultures, often during periods of reflection after crisis. What makes Giza unique is that this thinking was expressed architecturally at a planetary scale. The pyramid does not offer redemption. It does not promise survival. It simply demonstrates possibility. It shows that human beings are capable of extraordinary foresight when conditions demand it. Whether modern civilization will develop comparable foresight remains uncertain. The tools exist. The knowledge exists. What is less clear is whether restraint exists. The pyramid suggests that without restraint, knowledge accelerates toward collapse rather than continuity. This lesson is not pessimistic. It is grounding. It shifts focus from conquest to coherence, from innovation to integration. It asks not how much can be built, but what should be preserved. As the sun sets once more over the plateau, shadows stretch and contract, tracing the same patterns they have for thousands of years. The pyramid remains unchanged, indifferent to interpretation, immune to conclusion. Its role is complete simply by enduring. It has carried memory across a civilizational void and delivered it intact to an age capable of recognizing patterns, but uncertain how to respond to them. In this sense, the Great Pyramid is not waiting for belief. It is waiting for maturity. Whether that maturity arrives before another collapse closes the window is not for stone to decide. The monument has already done its part. It stands. The rest is human choice. The Great Pyramid endures into the present, not as a relic awaiting resolution, but as a fixed point against which human awareness continues to evolve. After centuries of interpretation, rejection, fascination, and reduction, it remains what it has always been. A structure that resists closure. This resistance is not accidental. It is the final expression of its design. Every civilization that encounters the pyramid attempts to claim it conceptually. Some reduce it to labor and logistics. Others elevate it to myth and fantasy. Still others dissect it into measurements, frequencies, and alignments. Each approach extracts something useful, yet none exhaust the whole. The monument remains intact because it was never meant to be fully consumed by a single framework. This quality distinguishes it from monuments of power. Empires build structures to project dominance. Their meaning is immediate and political. When the empire falls, the structure becomes hollow. The Great Pyramid wasn't built to dominate contemporaries. It was built to outlast them. Its meaning unfolds only over time, revealed through repeated engagement rather than immediate impact. Such a structure assumes continuity of curiosity. It assumes that future observers will not only exist, but will question their own assumptions. It does not depend on belief systems surviving intact. It depends on the persistence of inquiry itself. As long as humans continue to observe, measure, and reflect, the pyramid remains legible. This design choice implies deep confidence in human cognition, tempered by realism about human institutions. Governments fall, religions fracture, languages evolve beyond recognition. Curiosity endures. The builders appear to have trusted this more than any doctrine. The pyramid's simplicity reinforces this trust. It is not mechanically complex in appearance. It does not advertise function. It presents form. This forces engagement at a fundamental level. Anyone can see it. Only sustained attention reveals its depth. Complexity is hidden within simplicity, ensuring that understanding cannot be rushed. Modern humanity often seeks mastery through acceleration. Faster computation, faster communication, faster construction. The pyramid offers a counterexample. Its effectiveness lies in slowness. It takes time to notice patterns. It takes patience to correlate disciplines. It takes humility to accept incomplete answers. This slowness may be the most important lesson it offers. Systems that move too quickly become brittle. Systems that endure are those designed to absorb change without losing coherence. The pyramid has absorbed climate shifts, cultural upheaval, and interpretive violence without collapsing structurally or symbolically. Its survival suggests that resilience is not achieved through adaptability alone, but through invariance. Certain principles do not change: geometry, celestial motion, material behavior. By anchoring itself to these, the structure remains relevant even as contexts shift. In this sense, the pyramid does not belong to the past. It belongs to deep time. It operates on scales that exceed human lifespans and political cycles. This temporal scale is difficult for modern consciousness to inhabit, but necessary if long-term survival is to be taken seriously. The story implied by the pyramid is not one of triumph or tragedy. It is one of recurrence. Knowledge arises. It matures. It is lost. Fragments persist. Memory is encoded. Rediscovery occurs. This cycle is not moralized. It is observed. Accepting this pattern alters how progress is understood. Advancement is no longer guaranteed. Decline is no longer exceptional. Both become phases within a larger rhythm. This perspective encourages vigilance rather than complacency. The Great Pyramid does not instruct humanity to abandon technology or ambition. It suggests integration, power balanced by foresight, capability tempered by restraint, knowledge paired with responsibility. These values are not antiquated. They are urgently contemporary. The builders of the pyramid may have faced conditions similar to those emerging today: rapid environmental change, resource stress, systemic fragility. Their response was not expansion, but condensation. They distilled what mattered into a form capable of surviving disruption. That form now stands as an inheritance, not a blueprint, but a reminder that survival is not merely technical. It is ethical and cognitive. It depends on how societies choose to relate to time, power, and uncertainty. The pyramid does not accuse modern civilization of failure. It does not predict collapse. It demonstrates precedent. It shows that intelligence alone does not ensure continuity, and that continuity requires deliberate design beyond immediate utility. As interpretations multiply, the pyramid remains unchanged. Its faces catch the same light. Its angles hold the same relationships. Its mass presses into the earth with the same gravity. This constancy is not passive. It is communicative. It communicates without language, without symbolism that can be co-opted or erased. It communicates through persistence, through refusal to resolve, through the quiet insistence that something important happened here, and that understanding it requires more than convenience. The final significance of the Great Pyramid may lie precisely in this refusal. It does not allow humanity to settle comfortably into a single story. It keeps the past open, the future uncertain, and the present accountable. As long as it stands, the possibility remains that humanity can learn from its own deep history without romanticizing or dismissing it, that it can recognize cycles without surrendering to them, that it can build with foresight rather than urgency. The pyramid's role is complete not when it is explained, but when it is taken seriously as evidence that civilization has faced existential thresholds before and responded with deliberation rather than denial. In the end, the Great Pyramid does not belong to Egypt alone, nor to any theory that seeks to claim it. It belongs to time, and to those willing to measure themselves against it without illusion. It stands, not as an answer, but as a standard,